Okay, perfect. So, RinoZ, welcome to Slippery Words. I am so
It's nice to
excited
be
to
here.
finally have you. So those who are watching have no idea how hard we had to try to get this timing right. So, um, Ryan is in Victoria, Australia, and I am in Ohio in the United States, and therefore I am talking to you on 5:30 p.m. on Thursday, and Ryan is in the future
That's right.
at 8:30 a.m. on Friday. So I'm on Thursday, he's on Friday. So
Oh,
um,
it's magical here.
it is. It's like that Earth is round or something. I don't get it.
Friday's an incredible place.
I'm so looking forward to it. All right, so the the books that we're going to be talking about are your Chrysalis series. Now, you've also written an entire other two books, Book of the Dead, but I have to admit that I have not read or listened to those yet. So I have that on my to-do list. But we're going to talk about Chrysalis. I found Chrysalis simply because I was sort of roaming around on Sound Booth Theater and was like, okay, what's my next thing going to be? And I think the folks over at Sound Booth Theater are geniuses. I mean, some of the most talented people. Right? You agree?
Oh, absolutely. They put in an incredible amount of work, and their attention to detail is phenomenal,
Yeah.
which is why it takes a long time for them to get a book done because they put in so much time, so much effort. The end result is worth it, but it can be frustrating sometimes. Be like,
Right.
hey, Jeff,
Right.
Jeff,
So
the
the I have only
paperback version came out. The paperback version came out months ago, but
Yeah,
where are
so
you
I
at with
have only
Audible?
listened to books one through five, and I
Mm.
did buy book six, and also I had been reading ahead on Royal Road, which we'll have to describe what that is for people who don't know. But then I realized I really want to listen to it. So,
Mm. Oh,
so
they do such a good job. It's so worth the wait.
yeah. And I understand. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but for those who don't know, Sound Booth Theater, you should go look them up, has done the audiobooks for books one through five for
Mhm.
Chrysalis, and the incomparable Jeff Hayes does the most of the voices. And he
Annie
told,
Ellicott
I'm sorry, what?
does and Annie Ellicott does the female voices.
And
Yeah.
Elliot Alicott, yep, she's also great. I don't know if you know this, but in the immersive version of Matt Dinniman's Dungeon Crawler Carl, there is a cat, don't Princess Donut, when she's not able to talk yet, is meowing, and I got to ask Jeff, like, was that a sound effect put in like in post? And he was like, no, Annie meowed. So that was actually her meowing. So that was great. Great.
Believe it.
So I have now totally jumped ahead, but why
Yep.
don't you describe what Chrysalis is? Just what it is.
Oh goodness. Um, so we're talking about the kind of relatively new and emerging genre of the lit RPG, um, which is game lit, game literature, which is a term my brother thought was more digestible. Uh, where the story itself incorporates various game-like elements like levels and systems and skills, etc. So Chrysalis is a subgenre built into that, where the main character is not a heroic individual, who's been sent to another world to save the place. The main character has been put into the body of a monster. They've been reincarnated as a creature of the dungeon. And so Anthony, our main character, dies a rather tragic death. He's reincarnated as a monstrous ant in the dungeon. And so he's this tiny little ant monster who has to try and survive on his own, learn about this world and the system that he's been placed in, and find his way uh, back to his colony, back to his family, and try to adapt to his life in this new reality. Um, and despite that premise sort of sounding quite uh, traumatic and dramatic, he adapts. It's a very sort of light and
It's so much
easy
fun.
flowing. It's a light, easy flowing story. Like he's fine with it.
I
Just rolls with it.
I have a lot of questions about that, but I do tell people like if someone had said to me, "Hey, you know what you're gonna love? You're gonna love this lit RPG about this monstrous ant and the Roman legion." I would
Yep.
have said, "I'm sorry, what? No, that does not sound like something I would enjoy at all." But
No,
I,
no, man. Trust me.
yeah, it's so much fun. So
Yeah, I ran into a lot of trouble where it was like trying to family members and friends be like, "Oh, yeah, what's your story about?" Like, oh my God, how do I even?
really, really, if you just try it, you'll like it.
Yeah,
You
just give it a go,
started,
man.
yeah, you started writing this first on Royal Road, right?
No, no. First started publishing this on webnovel.com.
Oh my God.
Hmm.
Let's go in the Wayback Machine. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
how long ago was that?
About 4 years.
Okay, not as long as I would have thought. And then did you just move it to Royal Road? Is that what you did, or?
So at the time, it was I made the transition from being an anime fan, to being a manga fan to being a web novel fan. And then I discovered translated web novels. I was reading all of the Chinese wushu stories and stuff on Wuxia World. And then Kidan set up webnovel.com, so I was reading there. And then they started offering contracts to Western authors of originals. Like I remember I was on the website when they signed their very first Western author. And I was like, oh, shoot, I'll check it out. And I read it and I thought, this is not very good. I think I could write something better than that. And I'm not a great author. So I gave it a try, and my goal was to be published on webnovel.com. It didn't pan out. I wasn't willing. I was offered a contract, but I wasn't willing to sign it. So then I started spreading out, and I started putting the story on Royal Road as well. And
And
I set
then,
up a Patreon and
yeah,
tried to find another way.
and then you got like a traditional contract from there.
Yeah, and eventually, like way down the line, Athon got in contact with me, like the independent publisher Athon, and I signed with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to meet anyone from Athon, but I know they were at Dragon Con when I was there, and I'm sure I will
Mm.
cross paths with them.
Yeah, I'll be heading to Dragon Con next year.
I'm so excited. I already told you I will. I mean, you're going to have all these people that are going to love to meet you, and you'll have Athon, you'll have Sound Booth, but I will be there as well. And I love that you have a white and ginger cat. I do too. I have two gingers. Obviously, I turned around like you could see them, but I put up this weird kelp forest background so you couldn't see my messy office. So you can't see the cats either. But I do have two
Hello,
brainless
George.
gingers. What's his name?
George,
George.
say
Hi,
hello, buddy.
I know him. He's
I
so
have this one and I have a void.
Oh, really nice. I love that guy. So, all right. So I don't even know where to start because I have so many questions. Why a monster ant? Oh, I love the tail. Why a monster ant? What made you go, you know what I'm going to do? Just off the top of my head. I'm going to take a 15-year-old boy who starves to death, right? I'm going to make him die have to live this horrible, horrible life and then die this horrible, horrible death, and I'm going to turn him into a monster ant. Like, can you walk me through that thought process, how that happened?
Thought it would be funny.
Well, it is, minus the fact that this 15-year-old kid died such a horrible death. I had trouble with that, but
So, um, so the main inspiration for Chrysalis was the Japanese light novel, So I'm a Spider, So What?
okay. Wait, say that
Um,
again. What was it?
it's So I'm a Spider, So What?
Oh, so I'm a spider, so what? Okay, so you had the idea of an insect monster.
Well, I mean, a spider is an arachnid, not an insect.
Okay, okay, I'm sorry.
So I read that story, and it follows a similar premise because this is a subgenre. Like there's quite a lot of these stories where the main character is reborn as a monster. So this one, the main character is reborn as a spider, um, and they're born in this labyrinth and they're on their own, and eventually the story progresses. But what I really liked about that story was like right at the very beginning, the character was like a monster in the labyrinth in that story. It was really fun. It was really enjoyable. And later on, they sort of became humanoid and basically went to the surface, and it became. It sort of felt to me like it was just like any other, um, reborn in another world RPG story at that point. Didn't need to be a spider at all. Um, I was like, yeah, this was the most fun right at the beginning. What if I wrote a story where the whole story was just that, where it was just the main character, underground fighting against the dungeon the entire time. And I didn't like the idea of a spider because I thought, okay, well, if you're going to be underground fighting the whole time, it would be way better to have a social sort of monster because then you could bring other characters into it who were also monsters. You didn't need to transition to a humanoid creature who only interacted with other humanoids. So I also thought it would be way better. And I feel like the point of the entire genre, the subgenre, is that if you're going to have a monstrous main character, they should stay a monster.
Good point.
In fact, they should get more monstrous as time goes on, not less. And I've posted a fair bit about like I'm really tired of seeing monsters evolve into sexy humans.
Right.
It suddenly seems to like what is the point? It never needed to be a monster in the first place. Um, I mean, and the answer is for marketing purposes, but whatever.
Right. And
So I
storytelling.
thought, okay, yeah, that too, but I feel like it's mainly the other way. But I mean, you can tell a story with monsters. I was like, you
Obviously,
just
you
can.
can. You have proven it.
Obviously, you can. And so that was my main drive. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take the story, I'm going to take this idea that they had, and I'm going to take it in a different direction. It's always going to be underground, fighting the dungeon. They're always going to be monsters. Um, and I mean, it's might sound weird, but I like ants. I had a pet ant colony for a while. I know a fair bit about them. I thought, I mean, that would be really interesting to do an ant monster.
I could tell that you knew a lot about ants. There was no way some of the details you put in, like you had all these details about the different kinds of ants, and I was like, this guy knows ants. He does. He
This
does.
guy ants.
And it's funny that you just corrected me on the whole spider arachnid insect thing because Anthony makes a point of saying things like that, and he's like, I hate spiders. They're not insects. So
The
yeah,
8 legs. It's just clearly an inferior number of legs. Only
and
two
you're
body
and
segments
you're
as
Australian,
opposed to
so
three.
yeah, and you're Australian, so you know spiders.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. I don't mind spiders. I don't mind spiders at all. I actually am perfectly fine, but sometimes I see the pictures of the giant ones that you have down there, and I think that would scare me. That would actually
Yeah,
frighten
you
me.
know you're Australian when you see a big huntsman spider in your house, and you're
Right.
like, "Oh, good,
Right. Right.
there's a huntsman
Right.
spider in the house."
Huntsman spider is
They
great. Right.
they just eat they just eat other insects. This is great.
I saw someone lose their mind over a wolf spider and it was like only about like this big. And I'm like, just leave it alone. It's fine. It's not going to hurt you at all. So, all right.
Well, I
So,
mean, the size. I mean, a redback spider is pretty small,
and it could,
but I am not happy having one around.
no, no, there are all sorts of scary things down there. That's definitely the place where everything wants to kill you.
Hmm.
Okay. So this is like terrifying. All right. So you started writing this first book. Did you have any idea that it was going to go to six? Like, did you think in the beginning that like the first one was going to possibly be it, or did you have any idea that you were going to do a whole series?
Absolutely not. I had no idea anyone would read it at all. Um, but yeah, I started working on it. I had the concept, the vague concepts knocked out, and sort of general world stuff. And, I had the first 20 chapters ready to go and I rewrote them. I just didn't think they were quite up to scratch. And then I started publishing it, started putting it online. one chapter a day. And I had no idea how long it would go. I was just writing. There was no goal to have it published ever. I thought it would just stay online and be a web novel thing. And if I was really, really lucky, I'd get signed by web novel and maybe make some money out of it. I was working on my full-time job at the time. This was just a hobby.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And yeah, and this was like, early days of this kind of era. Like all the big published lit RPGs that we think of today hadn't been started then.
Right.
Like they didn't exist. So this was kind of like a bit of a wild frontier. And, just have picked up enough of a reading, enough of a following. Eventually I was offered a contract and I turned it down. I started publishing on Royal Road as well, and just gradually building more and more of a following. It just kept getting more readers. I just kept writing.
Yeah.
Um,
And the first contract, you just didn't think the terms were good? Is that what it was that made you walk away from that?
I can't really talk. I'm not. I can't really talk about the details of the contract, but yeah, it was
Yeah, you just
not
didn't.
good.
Yeah, not good.
It was
Um,
not for me.
yeah, okay. That's fair. And it's good that you knew that. It's good that you knew that because I think a lot of people will just jump at whatever comes first and not really think
Yes.
about, like, is this what I want? So
It's
have you
difficult to be
been
tactful when people ask for advice. They're like, "Oh, I've been offered a contract. Should I sign it?" And I'm like, "Well, how well did you read it?"
right? So, so important. Have you been a gamer? Like, I know you said you went from manga and anime, but were you a gamer when you were younger?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So,
Um,
so I come from the generation where girls were not invited to play like Dungeons and Dragons. It was like
mm,
the boys thing. So to this day, I have never played a single game of role-playing
oh,
game.
you definitely should.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to figure this out because I love
100%. We'll get you, me, Jeff, and Annie around a table and we'll play some D&D or something.
Oh my God, that sounds so much fun. I just want to roll a character. Like I want to do this so much. So, all right. So you decided you were going to write from this monstrous point of view. You decided it was going to be a monstrous ant,
Mhm.
um, who was going to be remarkably cheery despite everything. Like sort of
That's Yeah. Some people wonder why he had such a tragic life. Like, what was the reason for me giving him such a tragic human life? And on the one hand, I thought it would just be funny if he had like a horrible life experience, but had no idea how horrible it was. Like he was just kind of
right.
fine with it. He just
Other
assumed that
people
that was
have
what
it
happened.
worse. Right.
Yeah, he just assumed that everybody had it as bad as he did, right? I thought that would kind of be darkly humorous, but at the same time, I also thought that he needed to be that way in order to justify how fine he was turning into an ant
Right.
and having to
Right.
fight for his life constantly.
That
Like you
that
can't have a normal individual be put into that circumstance and plausibly be okay.
right. That was smart. That was smart. Um, do you know and will we learn who or what Gandalf is?
Yes.
Yes, you know, and yes, we'll learn. Okay, yes.
Hmm.
So again, for those who have no idea what I'm talking about, the sort of the god of this world is a character named Gandalf, the wizard. And Jeff Hayes, who does the audiobooks again, does a remarkable Gandalf. So he does a very good Gandalf. So okay, so this is great. I have this to look forward to because I've been really curious.
Yeah, you won't learn that till right at the end. Um, yeah, I've known since the beginning how the story would end because
Okay.
I like to have that. I need to have that direction
And so how
because
many
I'm
books
not.
are you thinking? We've got six now.
My aim was always for. I was never aiming for books because it was never going to be published as books. It was just going to be a web novel. So I was always aiming for about 2,000 chapters,
Okay. And
which is
we're
about
over
2 million
2,000
words.
chapters.
Sorry?
We're over 2,000 chapters.
No, no, not yet. The last chapter I published. Was 1429.
Oh, okay. So I left off at like 690 something. So
Mhm.
um so I'm behind. I'm way behind. So people
It's
who
a
have
long
already,
way to go.
yeah, I have to, I think that's where I did. I mean, I've listened, like I said, to the first five, but so anything that's in book six, I have not
Yeah,
listened to.
yeah, yeah.
Um, okay. Let's talk about one of my most favorite characters, Titus. I love Titus. He
Mm,
is a fascinating character. You really created someone so interesting because he's very, very honorable in so many ways, right? And he's
mm.
lost so much. Um, and yet, because nobody's really truly monstrous and nobody's really truly good in your world, like
No.
you know, that you've got this very honorable man who cannot, for the life of him, because of his life experience over a very long time, accept the idea that a dungeon born being, meaning a monster, because they're dungeon born, could possibly be an ally or a good person or a good aunt,
Yeah,
good,
exactly.
good character.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that particularly a lot of the lighter stories in this area fall into is that they have really one-dimensional villains.
Hmm.
Whereas when I created the Legion, I didn't want them to be like that. I didn't want them to be like obviously they're opposed to the main character. They're in opposition to his very existence. But I wanted them to have rationale and justification for being that way.
Hmm.
From a certain perspective, the Legion are the good guys.
Right,
They are protecting civilization. They're protecting humanity against, the creatures of the dungeon who are ravenous monsters who try to kill everybody. And the world went through a cataclysmic experience in the past, and they are constantly on guard lest the same thing happen again. So Titus is, in his own mind, is fully justified, has very, very good moral reasons for the positions that he takes, and the experiences that he's had over a lifetime of conflict and combat have reinforced those positions. He
right,
is 100% convinced that he's correct, and he has very good reason to think so.
right. But you know, his his convictions are admirable because he has them and they are based on real experience for him. But he has become um, what's the word I'm looking for? He
Inflexible.
inflexible. Yes, he's become
Mm,
inflexible. Thank you. Um, and cannot deviate, cannot mentally make the left turn needed to listen to Anthony or even his daughter, even Morelia, um, to say, okay, maybe this colony isn't as much of a danger as we think. Maybe we could be allies.
And this is where that's the one area where the Legion kind of tips into being bad guys, is that they're um, so inflexible.
Yeah,
Regardless of the evidence in front of them, they are locked into this position, and they have been for thousands of years. So, as an institution, they won't change, and Titus, as an individual and as a member of that institution, he won't change either. He just won't change his perspective. They're too locked into it. So, regardless of how much of a difference Anthony is and how much of a difference maker he could be, he and his family, the colony could be, they're not capable of accepting that. They're not capable of believing in that.
yeah, yeah. I happen to love Titus's relationship with his wife. That's hilarious. That scene in her office. I don't remember which book it in, but that's funny. And the part that's most funny is how he brings along two young legionnaires to act like a buffer because she's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I know what you're doing," you know. So That was
I thought that would be funny. Like you have the idea of Titus is built up as such a badass, and he is such a badass. But what if his wife was even worse?
yeah,
What if his
exactly.
wife was
Oh my
what if
God.
his wife was twice the badass that he was?
She's incredible.
Yeah,
She's
she's great.
amazing. So is Morelia gonna have to choose sides?
Spoilers. Um, that's one of the things that's being explored with Morelia. Um, and even at the point where the story is now, like with the most latest published chapters. So this is ahead of the books, like probably two or three books now. But yeah, like the dungeon, the colony and the Legion are kind of in very close proximity at the moment.
Hmm.
And so Morelia is in a position where she's kind of caught between the two, and she's trying to navigate that. And eventually down the line, that's going to come to a head, and she's going to have to choose definitively choose sides.
Yeah. All right. I have so much reading to do. I'm so behind. Um,
Just wait for them to be published. They're coming. I'm working on them. I promise.
I believe you. I believe you. Yeah, because I was getting a little impatient with Morelia. Like, like she needs to like I was like she has to choose. She's gonna have to choose. Like she's gonna be forced to choose.
Mm.
And
I
I
didn't.
also
Yeah,
hope no, don't tell me, but I also hope that she finally falls to the advances. Oh no, oh, I don't know what happens to him. Oh, he got really badly hurt. Oh, I'm not gonna say anything.
Isaac.
I'm trying to remember.
Isaac Bird.
Yeah, I
You're
have a
talking about
feeling.
his attempts to woo
Yeah,
Morelia.
but that might not be working out so well because the last time I remember reading about him, you left him bleeding in
I have
his
all the
room.
spoilers you want. All you have to do is ask.
No, I don't want to know. I don't want to know, but I've been very concerned about him. Um, okay, no, 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 no. All right. So, but he's very sweet. I love him as a character. And
He's a
Enid.
great guy.
Yeah, and Enid is hilarious. Like
Mm.
she's always talking about how old she is and that she's so tired, but she just keeps going.
Yeah. And eventually gets to the point where she tries to retire, and basically the ants just pamper her, and she hates it.
So funny. And the priest. So Bane is a priest in the story who, through a series of events that I don't want to ruin for anybody, becomes a true believer in the way of the ant. And
Yep.
I love
Yeah,
that
he's got a few screws missing.
he does, and I love that he yells mentally. Like, so Anthony's always like, "Stop yelling," in this mental talk. So, did you have
You got
to?
hold of yourself.
Yeah, but I mean, did you have to think like, how am I going to overcome the communication problem between ant and human and ant and you know,
Very early on, I knew that there would like be some sort of way to mentally communicate because, as I said, baked into the core concept of the story was the idea that okay, the main character is going to be a monster and he will remain a monster forever. In fact, the longer the story goes on, the bigger and more monstrous he's going to become.
yeah, he's like the size of a bus right now, but where I left off.
Yeah.
So he's a big guy.
And then, yeah, the intention was always by the end, he's going to be a kaiju, he's going to be Godzilla size.
Yeah.
Um, and we're going to have these enormous monstrous battles, which are going to shatter mountains and stuff. It's going to be awesome.
No, I'm
But,
excited. I can see this part is not a spoiler because, like, as a writer, I'm like, I know where he's going. I know
mm,
where he's going. You've done so much foreshadowing, um, about like his growth and the monsters who are so deep that like that you could see that coming, and
mm.
I'm excited when we get there.
Yeah,
Um,
so he was never going to become humanoid or have a way to speak with the people that he encountered, or how would he even learn the language?
right, right. It
It was
makes sense.
always
He has to be able to speak with humans and the Golgari, right? So we can't,
mm,
he's not like he's magically learning every language.
yeah, and the car motor and everything. So there was always going to be a way to mentally communicate, and he was going to eventually learn how to do it. Um, because yeah, it would be very difficult to progress the story if he wasn't able to interact with
Right.
people,
So
which is one of the reasons why, which is one of the reasons why the Legion chapters were introduced so early. It's just because, Anthony, when he's reborn in the dungeon, it's very, very difficult for him to collect information. There's no one
right.
for him to talk to. He doesn't know anything. How is he supposed to learn about the world? So I had to have another way to show the reader or to bring the reader in and do a little bit of world building and provide some context.
Yeah.
And so Titus and the Legion in those early chapters provided that.
Hi, George.
Ah, George, get off the keyboard. Okay, we're good.
Yeah, I have to work really hard to keep the orange male. We have an orange male and we actually have an orange female, which is somewhat rare. And Teddy likes to walk across my desk, like just like, you know, and I have to keep him off. All right,
I have to
let's
actually close the door to this office because if I have my hands out on the keyboard like this, he will just lie on top of my hands.
oh, that's so funny. If I close my door, he won't shut up. So I can't do that. Um, let's talk about something you and I talked about over email or text or something. The ant names.
Yep.
So what is so much fun is that most of the ants are named very clever things that end in ant. So my favorite is Michelangelo ant. I love
Michelangelo at the artiste.
the artiste, yes, and who provides a history. That's the greatest. Like her role. I think she's like sort of they're all female anyway because they're ants, but her role is like she's reflecting from the future. She's reflecting on the past, and I love her. What are some of your favorites? Some of the favorite names?
Um, Michelangelo's a great one. Historiant, I really like.
Yeah. Also one who's reflecting back.
Yeah, in the little opening chapter excerpts. Um, Actually, two of my favorite are not ant ones. Is Burke and Wills, who are the two scouts on the council. Burke and Wills are Australian explorers.
So they were so well.
Um, so I don't know. I always get a chuckle. The Australian in me always gets a chuckle reading about Burke and Wills.
I did not know that until
Uh,
you explained it to me. So yeah.
no, there's no reason why anybody would, right? I think it's only in there for me.
But so many of those things, like we all put those things in there, right? Um,
Um, yeah, I mean, I really like Vibrant as a name.
okay, so
I thought that
Vibrant is
suits
one,
her so well.
it does. She's one of the most fun characters because one of the things that she likes to do is to go fast, right? She's super peppy, like ridiculously peppy, and she likes to go fast. And my favorite thing is that she says everything twice. Cool, cool. Let's
Yeah.
go fast, fast. Like like, she says everything twice. Um, but yeah, and you had her like as a larvae, she was like bouncing up and down. So you had that like energy baked into her character.
Yeah, so she's like one of the special elevated ants, the champions, who kind of get a kickstart in life. Essentially, they create a following and they grow and become central figures within the colony. So she ends up with her own, loyal band of speedsters.
Yes.
They follow her around, and of course, as she grows stronger and as she evolves, she only gets faster.
Yeah, she's
And
awesome.
she gets to a point where she can't like she speaks and thinks so quickly nobody else can understand what she says.
Oh,
Like
that's
she has
funny.
to slow it down
Like,
to a ridiculous degree to be understood by anyone else.
yeah, like playing a record on slow speed.
And then she develops a technique where she actually takes micro naps between words. So that way she can speak to people and get sleep
And
and
sleep.
never have to go into
Oh,
and never have to go into
speaking of
torpor.
sleep. All right. I love her. Speaking of sleep, the sleep squad of ants are terrifying.
Yeah.
So So the thing about the ants, I'm just saying this for people who are listening, is they're so industrious, right? That they
And so
don't
selfless.
so selfless, so selfless. And they don't want to sleep because that's not being productive. That's not being efficient with their time. And so Anthony, our hero, has to sort of enforce a sleep rule. And then eventually the ants develop this, I just called it the sleep squad. I don't know, I don't remember if you had a name for them, but this group of ants who evolve specially to like sneak up on the unsuspecting, unrested ant and grab them and force them to go into torpor. So it's very funny because the other ants are actually a little terrified of them.
Oh, they hate them. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're absolutely terrified of them.
And they sneak up on the walls.
Oh, like they, yeah, and it just gets more and more elaborate. Like they start like emerging from the shadows. It's like enveloping an ant in darkness and then sinking away, and the other
Yeah.
ants just all they all look away because they don't want it to be them.
How long has it been since you've slept? 3 days.
Uh, it'll be fine.
It'll be fine, right? So yeah, so
Yeah, that was one of my yeah, that was one of my favorite things that I came up with for the colony. Is this? They never officially named themselves. I kind of just call them the Torpor Police.
oh, that's good. I called them the sleep squad in my head. Um, One of the sort of super fun things about the books, about the whole story, is the evolution, the whole concept of building skills and then like trying to max out the skills before your next evolution and all the various options that they're given, each ant is given, and then they start like diverging into these specialties, right? So you have the core shapers and you have the soldiers and all of that stuff.
Generals, the
Um,
carvers, the queens, the yeah, yeah.
yeah, you have everybody. Like everybody has a job, which is very important to ants that they have a
Mhm.
job.
They must have
Was
a role.
yeah, were you like inspired by real ants? Like how there are soldier ants and then there are like queens and then there are
Yeah, like some ants have I can't remember the exact scientific term, dimorphic or something. Um, where they will have like actual multiple um body types within the one colony. So, you can have colonies with like workers and then mages who, we would usually call soldiers, and then super mages who are even bigger. And but usually, most ant species will have two or three at most. Four if you include the queen themselves. Um, and I thought, we've got this. If you're going to have monster main characters, you may as well play with it, right? So, what's the advantage of being a monster that you couldn't really do with a human? So that's why, Anthony has the whole mutation system where when he eats other monsters, he gains biomass, and he can use that biomass to purchase mutations for his body. When he evolves, he can change his body completely. So it's really about his strength comes from his monstrous form, um, and just how changeable it is. It's just like a really fun sort of system to play with, and one that you don't really get to do with a human MC. It
but
wouldn't make sense.
how big is the
Wouldn't make sense for
spreadsheet?
Carl to be like, I leveled up, I'm going to get another arm.
Right, right. But how big is the spreadsheet?
Oh, it's painful. And I'm so bad at keeping track of it. And it's not like I don't try,
So can
but
you explain
without the aid of, I have to put this out there, without the aid of my volunteer editors, it would be a mess at this point.
can you explain for people who are not familiar your your sort of the ladder of changes. So you have biomass points and you have skill levels and they go up to like 5 and then like can you explain how that works?
Yeah, sure. So, to put it as simply as possible, um, monsters have certain parts of their body that are mutable. which can be improved using biomass. So as they hunt and eat, they gain biomass, and then they can use these biomass points to purchase mutations. So Anthony, for example, when he's newly born in the dungeon, he can mutate his eyes, his antenna, his mandibles, his carapace, and his legs, and his acid gland. These are from like a acid shooting species of ant. Um, so when he is in his initial form and is yet to evolve, those mutations max out at +5. And every time you reach a multiple of 5, you get to add a mutation effect. So when he first gets his acid to +5, he has a range of options to choose from. He can shoot further. He can intensify the acid and make it do more damage. He can make it sticky. He can make it, he has to pick from a whole bunch of different things. And then once he evolves, he unlocks the ability to improve his body to +10. And once he gets to +10, he could choose to double down on the mutation that he's already picked, or he can pick a new one to combine the two and make them more interesting. And then +15, and then +20, and then +25, as he evolves and evolves further and further. Other side of that is the skill system. So every time he levels up, he gets a skill point, and he can use that to either purchase a new skill or improve a skill which has reached its max rank. So once a skill reaches level 5, it's maxed out, and you need to pay another skill point in order to improve it. So, when he starts, he has pretty basic ant skills like Bite and Dig and Acid Shot. So he needs to improve those and rank those up as he goes. And then the final component of the system is when it becomes time for him to evolve. So every stage of evolution has a maximum level. So he reaches maximum level at level 5 for his first form. And then he could choose to evolve. And when evolving, you have a certain amount of like evolutionary energy that you could spend and essentially customize your body. He can buy organs to add to himself. He can, add muscles to become stronger. He can thicken his carapace. He could do all sorts of different things. And so it all sort of rolls together to form a kind of a fairly elaborate, intricate system with like an infinite number of possibilities, which is impossible to
So,
keep track of.
so elaborate. And you do
Mm.
this for basically every single, every single character, at least every ant. I mean, I can't even imagine how many pages and pages and pages and pages this system is for you.
That's a lot. And like, because I'm generally a disorganized person, half of it's on paper and half of it's in my head. And I'm constantly getting tangled between the two.
And so you have volunteer readers who help you keep track of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be completely lost without them.
Because if you got that wrong, I am sure there are people out there who love to say, "Oh no, 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 no," because in the last chapter he was already at 4, and
Yeah,
like to
yeah.
catch you on that stuff.
No, 100%. And they find it so easily. And after I spend like ages pouring, like every time I do a status chapter, it takes 10 times as long as any other chapter because I'm poring over it, trying to make sure that it's correct and trying to make sure that all the options are, the new options are interesting and not just recycling something that's happened before. Um, so a huge amount of effort goes into like every evolution and every status update. Um, and I always make mistakes. And immediately, readers just pick up on them immediately.
Well,
How do you guys know? I don't know.
there are data people out there. This is why I don't think I could write lit RPG. I'd have to hire someone to help me with that because I am, I don't think I could do that. Um, One of the most fun things though within this is the skills, the various skills that you have decided to make up that they can somehow choose, like the braced inner carapace plating. Love that. Hyper pressurized scatter shot acid nozzle was also really, really good. So, do you just like sit around dreaming of like new combinations of words you can put together to create some kind of new thing? Like, what else can I do?
Yeah, like it could take a long time, just sort of like as I said, they're quite frustrating chapters to write because you end up just sitting here swinging back and forth, trying to think of new adjectives. Like, oh, what's the word that combines these two ideas? Or because you don't want it to just be too wordy, like, just add new keywords for every new ability, just sort of becomes ridiculous. So it's always like, oh, can I emphasize this one instead of that one? Or is there a way to combine these two ideas into one word? Or,
Yeah,
and
because
and
once
of
you
course,
got to diamond carapace, like you had to start thinking, like, what else am I going to do?
mhm, yeah.
Right.
And that's the other thing. Like, it takes me a long time to try and come up with interesting mutations and abilities, like something that's going to be cool and useful. Because the worst thing you could do is add an idea or add an ability to the character and then have them never use it. This just doesn't come up.
Yeah.
Like you want every step of the progression to be meaningful. But the issue with these systems is that they always sort of become bloated the further on you go. So, if you get up to the point where Anthony is now, he's massive. He has tons and tons of mutations, tons and tons of skills. Like he's extremely powerful and has lots of different capabilities. Um,
So you're always, so sorry, not sorry, upping the ante. You're always, sorry, just couldn't help.
oh, I
Um,
love it. I love it.
you're always upping the ante, really, because he has to constantly be meeting characters who are a challenge.
Hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that I really wanted to build into the world setting. Um, so to use an example you may or may not be familiar with, which is Dragon Ball Z. So the idea of Dragon Ball Z is, obviously they're martial artists and they power up and then they fight. But the issue the writer runs into is he has to find new people who are stronger for them to fight. But where do
Right,
they come from? So, we get to the point where the main character, Goku, is the most powerful character on Earth. Okay, well, it turns out Goku was an alien all along. And now his alien relatives have come, have come to Earth and he has to fight and beat them. Okay, well, now he's overcome them. All right, what happens next?
right.
Oh, there's more aliens on another planet, and then that's the universe, and then we eventually end up at the point where it's okay. Now we're fighting alternate universes and gods, and it's just like you have to keep scaling up to find a new enemy. Um, Whereas to use another Japanese example, something like One Piece has that progression built into the system or built into the world itself. So, in One Piece, they go to the Grand Line. The Grand Line is like one narrow ocean which wraps around the entire world. Um, and if you want to find somebody stronger, all you have to do is go deeper into the Grand Line. Like as long as you go to the next island, the enemies are going to be stronger there because that's where they go. Because everyone's trying to get to the end, and obviously the strongest people in the world are the ones who are closest to reaching the end. So it's a very, very natural progression. Oh, the main characters just overcame this enemy. How are they going to find somebody stronger? Easy. They go to the next island. That's fine.
Right.
You don't need to invent enemies from an alternate planet, an alternate dimension. It's all built into the setting. So in Chrysalis, it was really important for me to have that natural progression. So if Anthony like overcomes a really difficult challenge, well, where does he find the next one? Easy. He goes down to the next
Yeah.
level of the dungeon, and there's more powerful monsters there.
But this happens in a lot of books, actually. This happens in a lot of fantasy novels too.
Mm, mm.
You know,
Yeah, it
um,
does.
where uh, the scariest creatures are. I'm just making this up. The scariest creatures are the vampires. Ooh, so scary. And then your intrepid hero or heroine or whatever finds a way, to beat the vampires. So now we have to have the super vampires, or we have to have the werewolves, or we have, and like at some point, I just read a whole series of books where like we got up to like gods, right? We went from werewolves to fae to demigod, and I'm like, okay, we got to be done with this series now, right? We're book five is it because we've gone as far as we can in that universe. So that happens a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's less of an issue in most like published fiction because usually the series aren't that long. So you can
Right.
have one enemy that they fight for, your classic trilogy. They fight against one enemy, they overcome them, and then it's over. That's the end. Whereas because web novels are so long,
Right.
it's really important that you have this built-in progression because you don't want to have to be constantly pulling rabbits out of the hat because you can only do that so many times before it becomes ridiculous and unplausible.
Right. So do you,
Like if there were super mega awesome vampires, well, how come nobody ever knew about them and
right.
they never came up when we were fighting the regular ones?
Right. Right. So with web novels and the kind of thing that you're doing, like the I guess part of what sort of part of the challenge maybe is not contradicting yourself, is to keep
Hmm.
your world rules, your magic system consistent so that, by chapter 1000, you haven't basically gone against something that happened in chapter 50.
Yes. Yeah. That's very, very important. You don't ever want to be in a position where you're having to break your own rules. And I've had to make adjustments because I didn't have the system like fully fleshed out when I started. Um, because I'm not that kind of guy. Uh, so, so I've had to make changes as it went around, as it went along, and introduce new concepts. And you have to be extra, extra careful when you do that, that it's plausible. Because I mean, Anthony doesn't know anything about the system, so he
Right.
can learn new things about it. And the colony doesn't know anything about the system because they only became intelligent thanks to Anthony and after he was born. So yeah, they're investigating it themselves. So when you have outsiders, like he has the Golgari instructors who can help him, and they can introduce new ideas to him, and aspects of the system he hadn't come across before, which helped me like patch up little problems here and there.
Right. Like having
But
the Golgari, having his friend, I can't remember the character's name now.
Brennan,
Brennan thing, like he was sort of and again, I'm reading this as I'm listening to this as a writer, right?
mm,
So I'm thinking he's a little bit of the as you know character. He's a little bit like, as you probably don't know, Anthony, you can level up, like turn your and then change everything to zero and then level up. And I was like,
mm.
oh, this is really cool, right? This is Ryan reestablishing all these magical rules, right? This is what's happened here. And you use those characters like that to like inform they're informing Anthony, but by informing Anthony, you're using them to inform the reader.
Then just and introducing ways where you can advance and take things to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I've kept you for a long time, but I have one more question for you.
That's quite all right.
How did you come up with some of the monsters? Guys, it's almost like you sat around doing that little swing in your chair and thought, I'm going to take a turtle and I'm going to mix it with a hippo. Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, and, and it can be very difficult to keep coming up with new monsters. Because every time they go to a new environment, right? Like each layer of the dungeon, each stratum of the
Right.
dungeon is completely different from the previous one. So you need to
How
sort of
many
try and
strata
in your
are there?
head,
How many are there?
you want to know?
Maybe not. Okay, no. No, I don't want to know. Okay, I don't want to know.
If I told you, you wouldn't be allowed to publish it.
Right. So I don't want to know. I
That's
don't want to know. I don't want to know. No, no, no. Okay. Go ahead. Keep going. So every strata
like,
you have to,
yeah, you have to kind of try and in your head come up with this own your like a unique ecosystem, and what kind of monsters live in it. So in the current chapters, Anthony's in the fifth, um, and he was fighting a giant snake. And then halfway through the fight, like he gets a bite on the snake, and he's like, "This is not a snake at all. That did not feel like biting into a snake." And he looks back, and the snake's eyes like start extending out, and it's actually a slug.
yeah.
It's a snake slug. Um, yeah, I mean, it's very difficult. Yeah, a lot of it's swinging back and forth to the chair. A lot of it's asking readers for ideas, like if you guys got any cool ideas that could fit with this setting. Um, and some people have like crazy awesome ideas. Some people are like, Some of them are like, wow, that's too dark. I'm not including that. That
I'm not
monster
gonna
is
do that.
horrifying.
That's terrible. Right. Right. All right. It's
Like
fun.
it does what to survive? No, I'm not putting that in the book.
Right. I love that. Oh,
But yeah,
and I wanted to tell you how much I like the aphids
yeah.
because ants do that.
Aphid, yeah, ants really do that. Yeah, ants were the very first farmers or cattle keepers the world has ever seen.
But it was
They're,
also
they're absolutely remarkable creatures, ants. I mean, obviously, I think that I'm the ant guy, but yeah, it's insanely versatile, like advanced species of creature, like just crazy the things that they can do. And yeah, one of the things they can do is literally keep cattle insects.
right.
They herd aphids, they pick them up and move them to the best parts of the plant so the aphid gets the best nectar, and then the aphid in return for the protection of the ants offers up like a sugary water that the ants can consume. So it's like a symbiotic cattle relationship that ants and aphids have together.
It was also a very elegant solution to your story problem of how are they going to feed all these new ants?
Yeah,
Because
how are they going to find enough biomass
yeah,
for
how
the
are we going to find
ridiculous
enough
number of ants?
time? Yeah, because you have these ants procreating at, well, ant rate, like at this
Mm.
phenomenal rate. And now, like where I am, they have three queens. And so they probably have more by wherever you are. And
Yeah, it's scaled up
it's
a
scaled
lot.
up, right? And
There's millions of them.
it's what's the word I'm looking for? Exponential.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, so it's just massive. And when I thought about that, I was like, well, no wonder the humans are so scared of ants. They multiply at such a phenomenal rate. They're just going to use up all the resources. So
Yeah, I mean, and in this system, they have an asexual reproduction. The only limiting factor is basically the how many eggs the queen can produce per day, and how much and if you could sustain the biomass input required to produce that number of eggs. So if they want more ants, they just need to have more queens and more biomass.
yeah, it's phenomenal.
So yeah, it just scales up really, really fast. And when the ants are, made to a human level of intelligence, it becomes really scary
Yeah,
really quickly.
yeah, it's great. It's great. So I want to recommend this to everybody again. I have had so much fun with it,
I'm
and
really glad you've enjoyed it.
I really, truly, and I'm so glad that you did this with me. And I really thank you for figuring out how to join me from the future into my past, into your
Oh,
past.
again, except the world is a completely different place. You're
Yeah,
gonna love it.
it's gonna be all changed, and you
Like
know,
Saturday is so much closer for me.
and it's all gonna be so different in like 15 hours. So yeah.
No, thank you very much for having me. I love talking about, I mean, not necessarily my stuff, but about this genre and about these books. It's really fun space to be in.
I have absolutely loved it. I have just really recently gotten into lit RPG and I have to say I don't usually love audiobooks because I'm a really fast reader. And so I
Mm.
tend to read faster than the audiobook, even if you speed it up. But I have found that lit RPG is the one place where I prefer the audiobook. And it's mostly because I love the storytelling component of it and I love the stats part, which I didn't think I would. And yet I find reading the stats, it doesn't sink in. But when I hear the stats, I'm like, oh, right. Yeah, he's pretty close to what, whatever. So, you know how it
Mm.
says in the audiobooks, it's always like, if you don't want to listen to this part, you can just fast forward 30 seconds. I never fast forward 30 seconds. I always listen to the stats.
You are a rare individual because, like, most people skip through them when they're listening. Like, they'll happily read through them because, you could just glance through the page, the tables and stuff, and you can look at it. But most people do not want to hear it go like skill by skill, number by number.
I listen to all of it. I do. I listen to all of it. But when I try reading it, my
That's
mind
fantastic.
my mind doesn't like quite absorb it. And
Mm.
And so I'm not getting the most out of it. When I listen to it and, it's pressurized, scattershot, acid nozzle, rank, whatever, I'm like, oh, he's close. Like, like he's,
Yeah. Oh man, that next mutation's not far away.
yeah, right, exactly. Oh my God, he's at a rank 75. We're getting ready for evolution. He's gonna need to go out and get all the biomass he can now, like, but I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe it's because I'm a writer, like I think like this, because it's sort of story, it's like elements of story and storytelling, but yeah, I love it. I never skip, ever.
The stats are just such a useful. I mean, there's a reason why people like this style of story and that it's kind of picking up. That's because it's a really easy way to look at progression, right? It's just you can
Right.
see your character getting stronger and improving in a really digestible way.
Well, a lot of,
Whereas,
we didn't mention this, but another description of this, another word for this is progression fantasy, right?
yeah, absolutely, this is a
That's,
style of progression fantasy.
yeah,
And so, in all the Wushu novels or the cultivation stories, the character has reached the fifth level of the core foundation stage. In their cultivation, it's
mhm,
just a way of tracking power and progression and a way of ranking people against each other. So it's very easy to understand where someone is in the pecking order.
yeah.
Um, and this is exactly the same thing. Like it's just so accessible, and it's really fun. Like one of the funnest parts about reading stories is what was it, progression fantasy in general, but a lot of stories is watching people progress and improve and get better as they go along. And
Right.
this style of writing or this genre of story gives you so much of that. Like even in Chrysalis, for example, along the journey, Anthony's had to make hundreds of little decisions of progression, and it's really, really fun, or at least I think it's really fun for the reader to be in that position and think about what they would do.
Right.
If this was my decision, or if I was put in this world, what kind of thing would I be looking for? What would I go for? So it's important that you present options and you allow people to imagine different avenues.
Yeah. Early on, I was getting upset with Anthony for not progressing his legs. I was like, you're just ignoring your legs. You need, I'm like telling him, no, you can't just keep making your carapace stronger. It's eventually going to get too heavy for your spindly little legs. You need to fix this. And then at one point he goes, I've really been ignoring my legs. And I was like, I told you. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yes, finally. This is why I listen in the car though. So people
So
don't
I got
know.
so many in the early days, like in those very first chapters, where he's like improving his eyesight because his logic is that I'm a little ant hatchling. I'm too weak to fight anything. Giving myself better mandibles is not going to help. It's not going to make up for the difference. So I need to be able to see what I'm doing. I need to be able to see where I'm going. And I thought that was quite logical, right?
It
But
totally.
I think a lot of people were so used to like the main characters being, just kicking ass and being so gung ho and invincible. I got a lot of hate. Like, why is he improving his eyes, man? It makes no sense. It's stupid.
No, it was totally logical. But okay, last question. Where did the idea of the itch come from when he
Uh, I just, I just thought to myself, if your body is, mutating and changing that fast, like if your eyes are literally improving and getting better, think of that like on the cellular level, what would that mean? Like, oh, I'm getting more rods or cones or whatever inside my eyeball. But you probably don't have any nerves there. But I thought like it would feel really uncomfortable and
was he
unnatural
the only one?
because it's funny.
Because it's funny. Okay, they're good. It's because it's funny. Excellent. And
Well,
and again, I'm a fan of the audiobooks, so I love listening to Jeff go, arg, arg, arg. Make all these like
I mean,
suffering sounds.
I have come up with a reason, like, because there has to be a reason. I can't just say that it's funny, right? So there is a reason in world why he is the only person who seems to experience this incredibly uncomfortable itch.
Uh,
But
do we
it
know
has
what
not
that
been.
means?
No, it's not been revealed. But yeah, the main reason was because I thought it would be really funny if he was the only one
I
of
think
this
it's funny.
incredibly uncomfortable sensation.
I think it's funny when he tries to hide, he has to go someplace to hide when he's mutating because he doesn't want everybody to see him like
He has to preserve
writhing
his
around.
dignity.
Yeah.
As the most senior and largest ant, he has to preserve his dignity in front of his family.
The
Like
eldest.
the
The
eldest, yeah, he
eldest.
can't be seen. He can't be seen rolling and flailing about.
Yeah, so good though. So funny. So funny. So okay,
I
again,
like it.
thank you for doing this. I'm so glad we finally caught up
Yeah,
and
me too.
able to do this. I'm going to stop the recording and then I'll let you go. But again, I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm really looking forward to the next book.
No, thank you very much. You're very welcome.
All right.